What if your anger wasn't a personality trait, but just a habit you've practiced too many times? Anger feels powerful, immediate, justified. But most of the time, it isn't strength. It's a reflex, a loop, something your mind does before you have time to think. And the worst part? You've done it so often that it feels like it's just the way you are. But what if that wasn't true? What if you could pause just long enough to see the pattern, interrupt it, and choose differently? This video is not about suppressing your emotions. It's about understanding them. It's about learning how to stop overreacting, retrain your emotional response, and finally break free from anger as a default setting. You'll discover Stoic tools, simple, powerful habits used by warriors, leaders, and thinkers for centuries to master your emotions calmly with intention. And you're not alone. Many of us were never taught how to control anger constructively, but it's never too late to start. So if you've ever regretted the words you said when you were upset, or how long you stayed angry over something small, this is your moment to change. Hit the like button, subscribe for more Stoic tools, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because once you realize anger is just a habit, you can begin unlearning it. And with that, you reclaim your power. 1. Emotions are not your identity. You feel it before you name it. The quick heat in your chest, the tightening jaw, the sharp tone you didn't mean to use, but did. It happens fast. And afterward you tell yourself, that wasn't me. But the truth is, in that moment, it was. Still, that doesn't mean it's who you are. Stoic philosophy offers a different lens, one that separates your reaction from your identity. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor burdened by politics, betrayal, and war, never claimed to be free from emotion. But he reminded himself daily that he was free to interpret those emotions differently. In his meditations, he wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." That sentence contains a powerful shift. It invites you to separate yourself from the emotional storm, to recognize that feelings are impressions, not facts, not definitions, not destiny. The Stoics called this phantasia, the initial impression that hits you before reason takes over. Someone says something rude, a colleague disrespects your effort, a loved one forgets a promise. In that first flash, you feel something rise: anger, resentment, indignation. But the Stoics taught that this first wave is not under your control. What comes next is the choice to accept it, fuel it, or pause and examine it. That belongs to you. Modern psychology agrees. Cognitive behavioral therapy, influenced by Stoic thinking, also teaches that between stimulus and response, there is space. And in that space, we can choose differently. But most of us don't. Why? Because we've confused the reaction with the self. We say, I'm just someone who gets angry easily, or that's just how I am. These are not truths, they're scripts, rehearsed lines in a story you keep telling yourself. Now, imagine breaking that loop. Epictetus was born a slave. He had no control over his circumstances. Yet he taught that we are disturbed not by events, but by our judgments about them. He didn't deny pain, he denied its power to rule over him. If a man in chains can think this way, what's stopping you? Let's look at this through a more familiar lens. Think of Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist. In the darkest conditions imaginable, he discovered that while everything could be taken from a person, one thing remained: the freedom to choose one's attitude. This mirrors the Stoic belief that inner freedom begins when you stop confusing your emotional surges with your core self. That clarity is where real strength lives. It's easy to fall into the trap of identification. I got angry, so I must be an angry person. That's like saying it rained once, so it must always rain. Emotions pass, habits linger. But identity is something deeper, something you create through your actions, not through your reactions. And this is where your power lies, in the space between what you feel and what you do next. So how do you begin to reclaim that space? First, recognize the emotional impulse as a signal, not a command. Feelings are data, not directives. If you feel heat rising in your body, don't let it drag you into an automatic reaction. Instead, label it. Say silently, this is anger. It wants control. The moment you label it, you start to shrink its power. Next, challenge your narrative. Ask, is this really about them, or is it about how I've chosen to interpret this? This isn't a rhetorical question. It's a tool. Your answer matters, because every answer you give yourself is either building or breaking your identity. And then, practice the pause. The Stoics didn't just preach calm, they trained it. When you feel triggered, buy yourself a moment. Breathe, count to 3, drink water, walk away, write it down. Not to avoid the situation, but to reclaim the space in which your best self can respond. Too often, people try to fix their emotions by suppressing them or exploding outward. Both are signs of disconnection, from the self, from clarity, from responsibility. The Stoic approach is different. It doesn't silence your emotions. It teaches you to see through them, so you can choose what kind of person you want to be in that moment. The common mistake is believing that intensity equals truth, that if something feels urgent, it must be acted on. But urgency is rarely a signal of wisdom. It's often a sign of habit, and anger, when repeated often enough, becomes not just a habit, but a mask. You wear it to feel safe, to feel in control, but it never really gives you control. It only deepens the illusion that you don't have a choice. The Stoic instead trains himself daily to question his impulses. Not to reject feeling, but to rise above reaction. To say, I feel it, but I won't feed it. That is a strength, that is power. And it's something you can develop, not in grand gestures, but in small, ordinary moments. How you speak when interrupted, how you breathe when provoked, how you respond when misunderstood. You are not your first thought. You are what you choose to do with it. You are not your emotions. You are the one who notices it, names it, and lets it pass. Today, start simple. When you feel the urge to lash out, pause. Ask yourself, what am I about to say that I might regret? Let the silence stretch. In that silence, you're no longer a prisoner of reaction. You're a student of it. And from that space, real mastery begins. 2. Emotional reactions are habits, not destiny. It starts the same way every time. The voice gets louder, the shoulders rise, the pulse quickens, and before you even know what's happening, you've said something you can't take back. Then comes the silence, the regret, the weight of it all. You didn't want to explode, but somehow, it always happens. Maybe not in public, but alone, in your head, in the mirror. We've been conditioned to believe that emotional outbursts, especially anger, are part of who we are. That some people are just short-tempered, fiery, or passionate. But these are not personality traits. These are trained responses, emotional reflexes built through repetition. You were not born snapping at your spouse, slamming doors, or losing your calm over a minor delay. These are patterns practiced over time. And anything practiced can be unpracticed. Your brain is a pattern-seeking machine. It loves shortcuts. The more often you react in a certain way, the stronger that neural pathway becomes. Anger becomes the autopilot. It gets triggered without conscious permission. But this autopilot is not fate. It's a habit. And habits can be rewritten. Picture a man walking a trail through tall grass. At first, every step is difficult, but walk the same path every day, and soon it becomes clear, smooth, easy. Now try walking a new path. The grass resists. It's harder, but walk that new trail every day, and it too becomes effortless. Your emotional patterns work the same way. This is why reacting with anger feels easier than pausing to reflect. You've walked that trail 1,000 times, but you can choose to step differently. You can stop reinforcing the anger path and begin laying down something new. In the Stoic tradition, habit is a central idea. Epictetus taught that you must guard your mind like a fortress. He said, every habit and faculty is preserved and increased by the corresponding actions. If you want to be calm, act calmly. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Neuroscience echoes this. The more you fire enough way, the stronger it gets. The less you use it, the more it fades. This is called neuroplasticity. You are not stuck, you are not broken, you are simply rehearsing a script that can be rewritten. And that script doesn't care how old you are. It only cares how often you rehearse something different. Let's be honest, reacting in anger feels good, briefly. It gives you a rush, a sense of power, control, but it's hollow, because after that flash, you're often left feeling worse, not better. The damage remains, the relationship suffers, and slowly, trust erodes. Not just with others, but with yourself. You stop believing in your ability to handle hard moments with grace. Now imagine a different kind of strength. Quiet strength. The kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. That doesn't need to explode to feel powerful. This is what the Stoics called fortitude. the steady mastery of the self, moment by moment, regardless of what the world throws at you. There's a common misconception that calming down means becoming passive or letting others walk over you. But there is nothing passive about choosing your response. There is power in the pause. In that space between trigger and action lies everything that makes you free. Seneca warned of anger's power to enslave. No plague has cost the human race more. And still, we keep feeding it because we haven't been taught another way. But you are learning now. You are beginning to see the emotional loop, not as a part of you, but as a path you've simply walked too often. So, what do you do with this realization? You begin training differently, not all at once, just one moment at a time. When someone disrespects you, don't fire back. Breathe. Shift your focus inward. Ask, what part of me feels threatened? Name it. Is it pride? Is it fear of losing control? Is it the wound of not being seen? When you feel heat rising, don't bury it, but don't feed it either. Let it pass through you like the weather. Watch it come, watch it go. If the urge to raise your voice builds, lower your tone instead. Soft speech disarms the storm. And in that space, you take back what anger stole from you. Clarity, choice, dignity. You're not trying to become emotionless. Stoicism was never about suppressing your humanity. It's about learning how to own it without letting it own you. In modern terms, think of this as emotional training. The same way you train a muscle, you train your mind. You practice responses that feel unnatural now but will become instinct over time. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. One small act today can begin that retraining. The next time you're triggered, say silently, "This is not me, this is my habit, and I can choose again." You might still feel the urge. That's okay, but the moment you pause, even for a second, you weaken the old path and start building a new one. You're not broken. You're just repeating what you were never taught to change. But now you know better. And knowing better is where unlearning begins. You've made it this far, and that says something powerful about you. Most people stop at the surface, but you didn't. You stayed, you listened, you reflected. That kind of patience isn't common. It's a sign that you're ready for something deeper. And if you've come this far, don't stop now, because the next part is where it all shifts. The Stoic reset isn't just another idea, it's the turning point. It's where theory becomes power and awareness becomes action. Stay with me. Let's finish this journey together and build the kind of strength that doesn't shout, but lasts. 3. The Stoic reset. Break the habit. You don't break anger by force. You outgrow it through clarity. Real change begins not with a reaction, but with a pause. That pause, small, silent, and almost invisible, is where the reset begins. The Stoics knew this well. They didn't teach emotional suppression. They taught emotional mastery through awareness, reason, and habit. When Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't speaking in poetry. He was laying down a method, a way of life, a way back to control. Anger comes fast, but it doesn't arrive alone. It's always preceded by something, an impression, a judgment, a story we tell ourselves in an instant. "They disrespected me. She always interrupts. He thinks I'm a fool." These thoughts don't just describe what happened, they define what we feel. The Stoics called these assents, the mental agreements we make with impressions. They taught that between stimulus and assent lies our freedom. Most people never notice this moment. They skip it. They go from trigger to explosion. But if you can interrupt this space, even briefly, you change everything. That's where the Stoic reset lives. In that pause, it's a 4-part process. Pause, observe, reframe, respond. Not as theory, but as a way to retrain your emotional reflexes. First, the pause. It doesn't have to be dramatic. 1 breath, 1 second, 1 blink where you don't act, but just wait. This is your opening. You're not running from anger. You're watching it arrive. Like standing at the shore and seeing the wave before it crashes. It will come. But you don't have to let it pull you under. Then you observe, not with judgment, but with curiosity. What's happening in your body? Where is the tension? What story are you repeating in your head? By naming what you feel, you create distance. You become the observer, not the emotion. A man who can see his anger without becoming it is no longer its slave. Now comes the reframe. You ask, is this really about them or about something in me that's unresolved? Is this within my control? These questions are not rhetorical. They are surgical. They cut through the noise. Most anger isn't about what happened. It's about what we think it means. That's the difference between reacting like a victim and responding like a stoic. When you reframe, you reclaim authorship of the moment. And finally, you respond not from habit, but from clarity. That might mean silence, a calm sentence, walking away, or even smiling, not because the situation is funny, but because you finally see how much you've grown. Let's ground this in something real. Think of a manager in a high-pressure office. He's used to yelling when deadlines are missed. It's how he feels in control. But one day, he decides to pause. His employee shows up late again. He feels the usual fire rising. But this time, he steps out of the room. He breathes. He observes, I'm angry because I think he doesn't respect me. But maybe he's overwhelmed too. He reframes, what if I ask instead of accuse? He walks back in and speaks calmly. The tone shifts, the problem gets solved, trust gets built. That's a reset. Not by force, but by choice. The mistake most people make is trying to change anger through guilt or shame. They say, I shouldn't feel this, or I have to stay calm. But Stoicism doesn't shame emotion. It invites you to examine it, to move through it with awareness, not repression. Anger, like fire, needs fuel. If you stop feeding it with rushed thoughts and automatic words, it dies on its own. We often think we need to fix our emotions, but what we really need is to retrain our perception. That's what the Stoics mastered. They didn't expect to feel anything. They expected to feel and stay grounded. It's not about being cold, it's about being clear. And clarity gives you choice, power, dignity. You won't get this right every time, but each reset builds a stronger pattern, and over time that pattern becomes your new habit. The calm becomes natural, the anger distant. You don't react, you respond. Not from fear, not from ego, but from strength. Quiet, steady strength. Today, you can begin practicing. The next time someone frustrates you, don't correct them immediately. Don't defend yourself right away. Pause. Let your body speak. Let your thoughts surface. Then ask yourself, is this the path I've always walked? Or can I choose something better? You don't need 10 steps. You need one breath and the will to interrupt the pattern. You've carried anger like armor for years. Maybe you thought it kept you safe, but it also kept you tense, tired, and disconnected. The Stoic reset isn't just a technique, it's your return to self, to calm, to clarify, to control, not over others, but over yourself. And that's where real power lives. 4. From outburst to stillness, how transformation actually happens. It doesn't happen in a dramatic moment. It happens in small, quiet decisions. No spotlight, no applause, just you in a situation that used to own you, choosing differently. Anger doesn't vanish because you will it away. It softens because you've prepared for it, trained for it. The transformation from explosive to composed isn't a flip of a switch. It's a reshaping of how you respond when everything in you wants to fire back. There's a story about Cato the Younger, a Stoic who lived in the last days of the Roman Republic. He was mocked publicly by a political rival who tried to provoke him into a reaction. But Cato remained still, silent, and calm. People asked why he didn't respond. He said, I will not wrestle in the mud. That wasn't weakness, it was a display of true inner strength. Cato didn't need the world to validate him. He had already chosen peace as his position. His response wasn't instinct, it was mastery. That is the kind of strength the Stoics cultivated, and that you can train too. Think of anger as a fire. If you add fuel, more thoughts, more words, more ego, it grows. But if you let it be, if you give it space, it burns out on its own. This doesn't mean you allow disrespect. It means you respond with intention, not reaction. There's a powerful difference between letting something pass and letting it control you. Now imagine a man, let's call him David. He used to react to everything. The noise from his teenage son, the missed deadline from his assistant, and even a driver cutting him off would ruin his day. It wasn't about the event. It was about his reflex. Every small slight hit the same nerve. Then, after years of high blood pressure and broken relationships, he began to study Stoic philosophy, not as quotes to collect, but as practices to live. One day his son slammed a door. David felt the usual rise, but he paused. He didn't speak. He walked into the other room and sat. He let the emotion pass through. Later he returned and said what needed to be said, without heat. His son looked surprised, but listened. That was new. Not because David won the moment, but because he stopped trying to. That one quiet moment began to rebuild a connection that years of yelling had eroded, not through force, through clarity. We often think if we don't react, we're being passive, but most reactions aren't strength, they're escape. Anger gives us something to do when we feel powerless. The Stoic path teaches you to hold still in that discomfort, to breathe inside it, and to let wisdom, not impulse, lead. The strength lies in staying calm when your body is screaming for chaos. People repeat the same cycle because they confuse volume with value. They think raising their voice means they're being heard. But the more you shout, the less people listen. The more you react, the more control you surrender. The Stoic doesn't dominate the room, he stabilizes it. And in doing so, he earns a different kind of respect. The quiet kind, the lasting kind. When you trade immediate satisfaction for long-term self-respect, you start to feel something different inside. Pride, but not the noisy kind. A quiet knowing that you didn't lose yourself in the storm, that you stayed anchored, that you were the one who stood still while everything else moved. So how do you practice this? Not in theory, in life. Every day brings you tiny tests. Someone cuts in line, a coworker speaks over you, a family member digs up an old wound. That's your training ground. You don't need to make speeches. You don't need to win arguments. You just need to stay in control of yourself. You are not what they said. You are what you choose to do next. Start with your breath. When the tension rises, don't push it away. Feel it. Own it. Let it move through you. Speak slowly. Choose fewer words. Don't rush to be right. Rush to be rooted. Next, pay attention to your inner dialogue. If the voice in your head is saying they always do this, or I can't let this slide, that's your old script talking. Pause it. Replace it with one question. What would I do right now if I were already free from anger? Then do that. Finally, reflect afterward. Not to judge yourself, but to observe. What worked? What didn't? Where did you feel in control? Where did you lose it? This is the practice, not perfection. Presence. Your outbursts don't define you. Your ability to return to stillness does. This isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about becoming unmoved by the things that used to hijack you. And in that stillness, something profound begins to grow. Respect. First from within, then from others. The next time you feel anger building, ask yourself, is this how I want to show up? If the answer is no, then breathe. Wait. Respond with less. And know this. Every moment you do that, you're not just controlling anger, you're dissolving it. And in its place, you're building something stronger, something unshakable. 5. Emotions can be trained like muscles. Calm is a skill. Some people believe calm is a gift, that a few are born with it, while the rest must live with their fire. But calm isn't a gift, it's a discipline. And like any form of discipline, it can be trained, slowly, deliberately, repeatedly. The Stoics didn't view emotional stability as something that happens by accident. They built it, layer by layer, through habit, thought, and practice. Epictetus, perhaps more than any other Stoic, knew what it meant to live with restraint. Born a slave in Rome, he had no control over his body, his environment, or even his future. His master could beat him, and often did. One day, as Epictetus stood chained, his master twisted his leg. Calmly he warned, "If you keep twisting, you will break it." The man didn't stop, the leg broke. Epictetus didn't scream, he didn't curse, he looked up and said, "I warned you." That's not a story about pain tolerance. It's a revelation of internal control. A man who had trained himself to remain centered, even when the world turned cruel. He wasn't numb, he was clear. And that kind of control isn't beyond you. It begins the moment you stop seeing emotions as enemies to conquer and start seeing them as energy to guide. You don't suppress the anger. You redirect the impulse. That redirection takes practice, but it works. The mistake many people make is trying to overcome emotions with logic alone. They intellectualize their anger. I shouldn't be mad, or it's irrational to feel this way. But the body doesn't care about logic in the moment of reaction. It listens to the pattern. And if the pattern is shouting, slamming, storming out, then that's what it defaults to. Thought without repetition doesn't change behavior. The Stoics knew this, which is why they repeated their principles daily, wrote them down, and tested them against real events. Marcus Aurelius wrote Meditations not as a book for others, but as a training log for himself, a mental gym. Each morning, he would remind himself that he would meet people who are selfish, rude, jealous, and unfair. He didn't do this to complain. He did it to prepare. So when the day began and those people appeared, he didn't fall into surprise or frustration. He had already trained the muscle of understanding. He could remain still, not because life was smooth, but because his practice was deep. So what does this look like for you? It starts when you wake up and say, today someone will interrupt me. Someone will ignore me. Something won't go my way. Not with bitterness, but with readiness. It prepares your emotional mind to recognize these moments as normal, not personal. That alone weakens the anger, because anger thrives on the idea that you've been singled out. But life doesn't target you. It just happens. The Stoic sees this clearly, and that clarity brings peace. Then, throughout the day, you practice small redirections. You feel the irritation rise, and instead of giving it space to grow, you label it quietly. There is tension. That pause is not denial, it's clarity. You don't have to analyze it deeply. Just notice it. Breathe. Let it move through without feeding it. Each time you do this, you're not only avoiding an outburst, you're building a new pathway. Over time, this becomes instinct. What once felt impossible, choosing not to react, becomes automatic. But it happens gradually, like building strength in a quiet gym when no one is watching. You may fail some days, you may lose control. That's fine. The work is returning, not judging, not punishing, just starting again. There's a phrase Epictetus used often, practice misfortunes. What he meant was this: don't wait until you're overwhelmed to learn how to be calm. Rehearse calm when the stakes are small. When the line is long at the grocery store, when the meeting runs late, when someone speaks over you. These are your emotional training grounds. You don't need to conquer Mount Everest. You just need to learn how to stand firm on shifting ground. Modern science now confirms what the Stoics taught centuries ago. Emotional regulation can be rewired. The brain can change. You can condition your nervous system to stay steady under pressure. It's not magic. It's not just for monks or philosophers. It's for anyone who chooses it daily. When you feel anger pressing at your chest, pressing behind your eyes, that is your signal, not to explode but to examine. You ask, what part of me is threatened? And is this moment worth surrendering my peace? And if the answer is no, you let it go. Not for them, for you. Because calm is not a favor you give others, it's a standard you protect for yourself. By the end of the day, ask yourself, where did I hold still? Even if it was one moment, one breath where you didn't lash out, you're getting stronger. That strength is quiet but real. It doesn't need applause, it only needs consistency. You are not too old to change this. You are not too reactive to train this. What you rehearse is what you become. So, remain calm, rehearse stillness, and soon what once felt like a struggle will feel like who you are. Not because you forced it, but because you became it. Anger is not your nature. It is a pattern, one you've repeated so often it feels permanent. But as you've seen, it can be unlearned. With clarity, practice, and presence, you can train yourself to respond with strength instead of rage, with control instead of chaos. This is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming deliberate. Calm is not weakness. It is quiet power, earned, sharpened, and carried by those who refuse to be slaves to impulse. The Stoics didn't ask us to be perfect. They asked us to be conscious, to wake up each day with the intent to master ourselves, moment by moment. As Epictetus said, no man is free who is not master of himself. That mastery begins with one breath, one pause, one moment of restraint when your anger says, strike back, and your wisdom replies, not this time. Let this be the foundation of your practice. Start small. In the next difficult moment, notice the wave. Don't react. Watch it rise and let it fall. That's how you begin to build the Stoic mind. A mind that doesn't flinch, doesn't explode, and doesn't surrender peace to petty things. So carry this with you, live it, and if it helped you, share it. Share your own stories of growth in the comments below. Someone else might need your experience more than you know. You don't have to be ruled by emotion. You can stand still in the fire, calm, focused, unshaken. That is who you can become. One pause at a time, one day at a time, and it starts now.